Hi, fourth graders. This is Mrs. Kaylin. I'm here with your library lesson for this week. Just wanted to start off by saying that I got some really wonderful conclusions to the poem that we read together last week, but only from a couple of you. So I do need you to submit your poem to me, even if it's late. It is part of your grade. I know that you don't get a grade for library, but that participation goes to your grades for language arts. So please turn in your 3 lines of poetry. It won't take you too long to do it. You can email it to me or submit it in Google Classroom the way that you would your music or art assignments. And I'm still looking forward to seeing what you will do. Thank you to those of you who have submitted your poems already. What we're going to do today is we're going to get back to, we have what I believe is just 2 more chapters of the 21 Balloons. We're going to finish them in the next couple weeks with still some time to do some other exciting activities before the end of the year. But before I do that, I'm just going to spend about less than 5 minutes showing you Mrs. Neville and my teacher page for the library, because even though you may have seen this before, Mrs. Neville may have shown this to you last year. She may not have when you were in 3rd grade. But this is a place where basically anything that I have talked to you about this year, any research tools, our library catalog, the World Book Encyclopedia, our summer reading list, all of that lives on this page. You can find it there anytime. So I just want to make sure I show you how to get there. And while we are not together, you can find any of the information that we've talked about together throughout the year or even before that. And you can see some of the things that you can even look ahead to some of the resources that we use in 5th and 6th grade. So I am just going to do a screen share for a minute. So you can see the library teacher page. So your teachers all have teacher pages as well. And you may use them in your classroom. Some do, some don't so much, but the library has its own. So we're going to go ahead and I will show you. We have here the High Point Academy website. And from here, you're going to go to the parent tab, actually, which kind of feels a little funny to go to the parent tab. It's already logged in for me on my computer, but I'm going to actually send you instructions on how to log into this. But you're going to go to that parent tab. It's going to ask you for a login. The login ID is parent, and the password is Eagle1720. It's the address of the school. So I will send that to you. I'm going to post that so you'll be able to post the entire instructions start to finish on how to get to it. So you'll be able to log in on your own. And I'm going to give you a very short assignment this time just for you to practice using this. So we're going to go, this is the parent portal. You're not a parent, but there are some things here that you may access. And here are the teacher pages. So you can see right here, I'm going to click on teacher page and then scroll down through all the grades, past junior high to enrichment. And here we have library. So here, welcome to the library. The library teacher page. And on the side here in this sidebar, you can see there are many links that some of which are more for parents. Things like our library program, you may not need to read about our whole library program, but there are many links to research resources. And especially as you are learning from home right now, it's really helpful to be able to access these. These are, many of these are databases that we pay for, things that you can't just access from using the internet from wherever without signing in. So We have subscriptions to many of these, things like World Book Encyclopedia and the ebooks through World Book, which actually next week is what we are going to be focusing on. And we're going to be doing kind of like a little scavenger hunt activity using those. So those are there. All of our book lists, our summer reading lists are all there. So if you are ever looking for, recommendations of books to read, you can always ask me, but you can also just take a look at some of our recommended books here. Our library catalog is here, and then some of down at the bottom, I'm going to pull this up for just a second, are a couple of prezzies, the presentations that I've done in class. I believe these two I've done for 5th grade, how to spot fake news and how to find credible websites. But very often after I teach something to you, I will post it up here. So you can use this as a resource anytime. So that's just a little introduction to the teacher page. Since we're not together right now, I'm glad that this is a resource that anybody in our school can have access to. And you as students, if you're looking for something, this is where it lives. So I will take you through the login process in a post on our Google Classroom page, and so you can access it anytime. Okay, there we go. So that's that. And now back to the 21 balloons. Okay, so last time we had a long chapter, but quite an exciting one. Last time we read the Merry-Go-Round, the exciting tale of the invention of the children of Krakatoa. And today, we're kind of getting more into what happened to kind of conclude the story, where now you can see we're on page 135. This is chapter 9. There are 10 chapters. And remember how Professor Sherman ended up at the beginning of the story floating in the wrong ocean, not the one that he started in, and ending up basically shipwrecked, balloon wrecked, and being rescued in the ocean. So we're getting to the events that led to that. This is chapter 9, concerning the giant balloon life raft. The next morning, I ate breakfast with my fellow Krakatoans, at Mr. C's Chinese restaurant. I will tell you quite frankly that I have no idea what I ate at any of the meals on C Day. I am not too particular to Chinese food and didn't even dare ask what I was eating for fear that any accurate description or analysis would only add to the uneasiness which I suffered through each meal. I noticed that many of the children toyed with their dishes in equal apprehension. So it seems like not everyone is as good a cook as their neighbors. I used their method of eating some of the portions, which had consisted of removing toasted almonds carefully from the top with a fork and leaving the rest. Mr. F. scolded me for this display of timidity and poor taste, and told me that to acquire an appreciation for good food, I should show a little more courage and will to experiment. And I will point out, too, this was at a time even when this book was written in the 1940s, that international food from other countries in the world, was incredibly uncommon. People in most parts of the United States ate pretty simple food and were not familiar the way that we are with the food of many cultures. The way that I eat, where I have Thai food one night, I have Italian food another night, I cook Chinese food, I cook Indian food at my house, even though my family doesn't come from any of those cultures. That was very different back then, and especially in the time that this is set in the 1890s. I assured him that I had a great desire to become an accomplished gourmet while living under the restaurant government, but preferred to arrive at this at gradual stages over a long period of time. Mr. F. asked me what I wanted to do after breakfast. I told him that being isolated on an island in the position of a perpetual guest with no work to do, I was fast getting to think of living in terms of holidays back home. On a hot Sunday in San Francisco like this sea day of the month of Lamb in Krakatoa, I would probably go to some beach and do some swimming. I suggested a swim to Mr. F. He thought this would be a fine idea, so we put on our bathing suits and bathrobes and made our way to the outer fringe of the jungle to a nicely cleared, fine coral beach. I had arrived in Krakatoa on the afternoon of A Day. It was now the morning of C Day. In that short time, I had become quite used to walking on the moving landscape. I was amazed at how fast I had acquired my mountain legs and felt rather proud of myself. The little beach looked very funny to me when I stopped and thought about it compared to the beaches back home. For here, the ocean was quite calm and the beach was going up and down. So think about it. Usually you're at the beach and what moves? The waves, right? Here, the sand is moving and the ocean is calm because of the volcano, right? How's the swimming here? I asked. Excellent, said Mr. F. You'll see. I waded in the water up to my waist and there experienced a delightful sensation. The sand beneath me rose up to the surface of the earth until I found my feet out of the water. Then it lowered me back down and the water was up to my neck. I stood in one place and went in and out of the water, spending a few seconds in the blazing tropical sun and then being dunked down again into my neck in clear, cold water. Up and down, in and out, without having to move at all from the place I was standing. Mr. F. had waded a little deeper into the water, and then I had seemed to enjoy being entirely dunked up over my head at the earth's lowest drop, and then rising with the earth until he was only in his knees in the water. Once, when temporarily up to my waist, I dove towards deeper water to do a little swimming. I hadn't gone very far when I felt the sand rise beneath me and lift me by my stomach out of the water. Most peculiar feeling. Mr. F. explained to me that it was necessary to wade out quite far to do good swimming. You should walk far enough so that you are up to your waist in the water when the surfaces of the earth beneath you is at its highest rising point. I did this half walking, half dog paddling, and when I was far out enough, enjoyed a good swim. Back on the beach, Mr. F. and I decided to take a sun bath. He told me that he had found it best to let the surface of the earth roll you around when it moved and not try to lie in one position. We did this and were nicely toasted on all sides by the hot sun. I was enjoying a most pleasant morning and decided right away to make this a daily habit. The night before, I had borrowed an atlas from Mr. F. and had looked up Krakatoa in it before going to sleep. I found that it was situated in the Sunda Strait between Sumatra and Java, and that it was about 25 miles from both of these huge islands. Looking at the map and trying to trace my path, the path of my voyage in the globe, I was amazed to see how much of the land I had missed on my trip. I must have flown between Mindanao at the southern end of the Philippines and the Celebes Islands, over the Celebes Sea. I must have flown over Borneo one whole night, narrowly missing mountains and at times being very close to the ground. I shuddered when I imagined the rude awakening I would have had if the globe had struck a mountaintop in Borneo, while I was peacefully asleep in my inflated mattress. The Pacific Ocean is the biggest body of water in the world. Krakatoa, which was only 18 square miles in size, was one of the smallest islands in the Pacific. So if you think about that, that is 18 square miles is like smaller than Los Angeles. So that's how big the entire island is. I set out to land in Asia, the world's biggest continent, and completely missing many enormous islands, traveled thousands of miles over water and landed on this tiny piece of land. Had a sea captain set out across the ocean for, let's say, China and missed it by a few thousand miles and landed instead on Krakatoa, he would have been stripped of his commission and had his ship taken away from him. But to balloonists, stories such as mine are typical, and balloon trips are only considered unusual if you arrive within 100 miles or so of your planned destination. I was thinking of how delightful this all was, the freedom and surprise of balloon travel, and of the balloon merry-go-round that I had taken such a fantastic trip on that afternoon. Then it occurred to me that the balloon merry-go-round was a pretty big affair. and it seemed to me that it should be visible when up in the air on a clear day from either Java or Sumatra. I asked Mr. F about this while basking in the sun. We don't worry much about that, he said. There are several reasons why. One of them is that the balloon merry-go-round is painted sky blue and therefore really isn't visible from too great a distance. Another is that the balloon merry-go-round never goes over 5 or 6 miles on its longest trips and that doesn't bring it very close to Java or Sumatra. Then, too, the mountain has a reputation for belching forth strange things, and the whirling balloons and boats look quite like a blue smoke ring from a distance. But there's a very important reason why we don't worry about being seen. In 1877, our second year here, the mountain was so violent that it scared people living on the shores of the Sunda Strait in both Java and Sumatra, so much that they moved their homes inland and about 25 miles on each island. So Java and Sumatra are two of the biggest islands in Indonesia. Indonesia is a country made up of hundreds of islands, Java and Sumatra being two of the biggest. These are islands that are, bigger than a lot of countries are. So when we're talking about Krakatoa as a very tiny country, just 18 square miles, Java and Sumatra are probably thousands of square miles. I can look up the hundreds or thousands, but they're many, many times bigger. They're islands that when you look at a globe, you can see these islands as, prominent big features. They're as big as, countries like Japan. Let's see. The whole of Krakatoa was violently rocked from end to end. Oh, okay, so there was an eruption in 1877 that scared both the residents of Java and Sumatra, so the big islands on either side. The whole of Krakatoa was violently rocked from end to end. Waves were formed in the Sunda Strait, traveling outward from the island as a center. Giant waves were swept onto the shores of Java and Sumatra, completely inundating many homes. And this part of it is true. The noise was formidable, and the waves caused so much damage that people moved from the tips of the islands in great haste. We have reason to believe that no one dares live within a radius of 50 miles from us. Great heavens, I exclaimed. How did such an explosion affect you while you were living right here on the island? It was quite bad. Many of the huts we lived in at the time collapsed like card houses. No one was hurt much, though many of us were knocked unconscious or had our wind knocked out of us from being abruptly thrown to the ground. The noise of the explosion wasn't too bad on the island. I suppose the fact that we were right on the island made the noise more bearable. If you stand right near the large artillery piece when it's fired, you are less bothered by the noise than if you were 50 feet away. We picked ourselves up, helped those who were in need, and went about the business of rebuilding our houses. This brought up another point that had been puzzling me. Why, I asked Mr. F., do you people live here on top of this dormant volcano, when with a handful of diamonds, you could live a life of lavish ease and comfort in any other country? So let's pause for a moment and wonder about that. What would you do that? If you could either have the choice of taking 2 or 3 of these diamonds, leaving the island and selling them, and living a life of luxury anywhere in the world, or staying here and living this life on Krakatoa, what would you choose and why? I'm not sure what I would choose. I would probably leave. It's a pretty isolated island, especially, even after a few weeks of staying at home, you start to miss people, right? Your question is a puzzler, and there really is no logical answer to it. It suggests a series of other questions of exactly the same nature. For instance, why doesn't a millionaire in any other country consider himself rich enough to retire? Why does he try to make another million? Why do tycoons with several millions of dollars try to make $1 billion, a sum so huge they couldn't possibly spend it in a lifetime? As long as we have our diamond mines kept secret, the 20 families of Krakatoa match the rest of the world in wealth. So imagine that. Their wealth on that one island matches the entirety of the rest of the world. We couldn't live happily in any other country. We would be haunted by this unbelievable dream of this unheard of wealth back in the island. And here they are. This is them being knocked to the ground in their last explosion. And we could take our diamonds, that is all of our diamonds, to another country without, if we could take our diamonds to another country without destroying our value. We are slaves of our own piggishness. We have locked ourselves in a diamond prison. On the other hand, we were very happy here, and I suppose that the fascination of knowing that we are each one of us richer than combined Midases, Nabobs, and Croacy of history enters into us the Krakatoan spell which keeps us here. But this spell, as you call it, seems a little unreasonable to me for the simple reason that it challenges the will of human nature that is far greater than the will to be rich, this being obviously the will to live. How can you live happily here under the constant threat of being blown to sky high? Now that I think of it, this whole island is like a turkey stuffed with nitroglycerin. The surface of the earth here, which is right at this moment moving gracefully up and down, is obviously activated by molten lava. A crack in the earth's surface and the cold waters of the Pacific would rush in. Imagine what would happen. Cold water coming suddenly into contact with molten lava. This hollow, rumbling shell would suddenly find itself like a covered kettle of boiling water on the stove. The resulting steam would cause pressure enough to blow the top right off the whole island. No one could survive such an explosion. What good would your diamonds be to you then? Oh, we are all too much aware of this possibility. So now remember, this is Mr. F talking again. It troubles me just to hear you mention it. We have come to look upon it in this way. If it should happen with the speed which you have just described it, no one here would have time to think or know what was happening to him. It would be a painless death. However, if we have warning, which we all somehow expect to have, there is a quick escape from Krakatoa. Give us as little time as 10 minutes to get off the island. We'll all be safe and on our way to some other country. This escape and the fact that Krakatoa has been here an uncalculated length of time without blowing up makes living here under ever-present threat of extinction possible. What's the escape, I asked. Do you keep the freighter always steamed up and ready to go? It would take the freighter longer than 10 minutes to leave here, said Mr. F. It's not that. It's the other invention I promised to show you yesterday. This is an invention we all worked carefully on for many months, starting right after the big explosion in 1877. Our lives depend on it. And due to its huge size and its motivating power, we are unable to try it out. There is no reason why it shouldn't work. And when I say this, I mean no reason on paper. Its maiden voyage will have to prove its worth. It is a flying platform, a huge platform, big enough to take us all swiftly into the air within 10 minutes of warning from the mountain. A platform capable of lifting 20 families of 4, I asked. This makes child play of flying carpets. How do you hope to get it off the ground? With balloons, answered Mr. F. This idea appealed to me immensely. The idea of the lives of 80 people being entrusted to such fickle and unpredictable traveling companions as balloons was quite frightening, but thoroughly enjoyable. Now remember, what is the title of this book? The 21 Balloons. So clearly, these balloons have an important part to play. Just making sure we have plenty of time. We've got a few more minutes. Now, I find you are incurable romantics. Tell me how such a massive weight as 20 families can be lifted off the ground. I beg your pardon, said Mr. F. We are not risking our lives with any foolhardy conveyance. The balloon platform must work. It's got to work. It can't help but work. Look, I'll show you. I walked over to where Mr. F. was lying, sat down beside him, and watched him as he sketched the platform in the sand. He made the bird's eye view of it and drew 20 balloons around its outside edge. It was rectangular in shape. He started writing numbers in the sand. I don't know how much the actual platform itself weighs, he said. It is made of the lightest pine in the world, imported to us specifically for this purpose from South America. It is made of light beams, and the floorboards are laid with spaces between them for greater lightness. The balustrade around the platform is of hollowed wood. The woodwork couldn't possibly be made lighter. But before I tell you about the balloons, I want to make it clear that I am going to give you the figures in round numbers, with the margin of error in favor of the success of the machine. Thus, the lifting power of the balloons will be calculated as a little less than it actually is, and the weight we will be carrying is computed as heavier than it actually would be. There really is no accurate way of planning balloon inventions. Too much depends on atmospheric conditions, the purity of the hydrogen used, and the weather conditions. I will give you the roundest of figures. And here he is, drawing his diagram in the sand. I understand, I said. The balloon platform is lifted by 10 large balloons of 32,400 cubic feet each, and 10 balloons. Now remember, when we were starting out, I had you guys calculating some of the math problems in this. If you'd like to follow along and write this down and figure it out, you can too. 10 balloons, half as big as the larger ones, of 16,200 cubic feet each. The larger balloons will fly higher than the smaller ones, which will be situated in the spaces between the larger ones, thus alternating around the platform, one large, one high, one small, one low, etc. I see, he said. I said, the total hydrogen needed to fill will be 486,000 cubic feet. Free hydrogen has a lifting power of roughly 70 pounds per 1,000 cubic foot. 20 balloons have a combined lifting strength of 45,360 pounds. How much do you figure that 80 people will weigh? Well, he said, writing down more figures in the sand, if you divide 80 people by the sexes, half are women. If you divide them by generations, half of them are children. 130 pounds per person is a safe figure under these circumstances. 80 people will weigh 10,400 pounds. But let me see, how much do you weigh? In the roundest of numbers, I answer, I weigh 180 pounds. All right, said Mr. F, that makes 10,580 pounds, leaving 34,780 pounds to take over to take care of the total weight of the platform. I agreed this all sounded very reasonable. I think we're going to have to pause. We can continue. I agree this all sounded reasonable, but one thing that bothers me, how do you get the balloons filled with hydrogen and the platforms off the ground in 10 minutes? That was our most difficult problem. Come with me, I'll show you the platform and how we think we have solved the problem of a fast getaway. I put on my bathrobe and followed him through the jungle fringe. After a good long walk, we came to the clearing, which was as far away from the island from the mountain as is possible to get on the island. The huge platform was situated here. I remember having seen it from the balloon merry-go-round 10 days before. I had thought then, seeing it from the air, that it was a sort of outdoor dancing floor with a bandstand in the middle. What I thought was the bandstand turned out to be a large steel cylinder. Mr. F showed me 4 great wooden vats, one on the ground near each side of the balloon platform. There were hoses leading from the vats to the balloons in what Mr. F described as pitchfork connections. The hoses were large and single as they left the vats, and then branched off into smaller hoses, one attached to each balloon. This is how we believe we have solved the problem of a quick takeoff. Compressed hydrogen. Each of these vats contains 300,000 cubic feet of hydrogen compressed at 1,600 pounds a square inch. Mr. F picked up one of these hoses and showed it to me. There was a sort of ball and socket connection with each hose. He explained that it took 150 pounds to pull each separate hose of this connection. And I'm actually going to show you this connection, but I'm going to kind of move on through this part because I want to finish this page before we conclude for today. I walked around the platform. The floorboards were springy underfoot, and you could see the grass through the spaces in between them. I tried to imagine this huge floor in flight, looking through the boards of the city underneath. at a city underneath. How frightening and incredible it would be moving through space on such a huge piece of construction with 80 other people. The balloons were carefully folded under tarpaulins. I took a look at several of them. They were magnificent. Each balloon painted with many different iridescent colors. I tried to picture the reaction of people in other countries as they were suddenly to look up in the sky and see the balloon platform. Its white lattice floor bordered by a graceful balustrade over which were leaning the richly clothed Krakatoans, 20 brilliant balloons from above, and the frightening silence with which a huge airship would suddenly make its appearance. I'm going to stop there today. So we will conclude the book in just one more reading. That's all for today. Next week, we're going to take a short pause from the 21 balloons and do a little bit of a research day, which I will hopefully do with you by Zoom. I'm looking forward to seeing all your faces. I've gotten to see the other two grades that I see, the 5th and 6th graders. I have not gotten to see my 4th graders since we left school. So look for a Zoom link next week, and I will see you then. Thanks.